Hey, my name's Alexander White, and today I want to share with you my favourite 5 plugins that you can use on any mix, and that's regardless of genre or style. The benefit of this is you're going to be able to know exactly what plugins you're putting on your mix to start off with, and you're going to have such a massive head start. You're not going to have to worry about which plugins to choose. You're not going to have to spend ages scrolling through lists or comparing this compressor with that compressor and getting all caught up in things that really don't actually matter that much for your mixing. So let's start off with plugin number 1. I have an unmixed track here where I've just loaded in the stems and just set up my session as I do for every single mix that I do now, which is, it's not really a template. I do use a template occasionally, but I'm imagining we're starting off from scratch here. So plugin number 1 is a tape emulation plugin. I love these because they are so good at doing so many things in one go. They're great at doing compression and saturation and just changing the tone in general. They're really good at this. And so it's a brilliant first place to start going, well, I wonder if I can get some extra excitement in this sound. I wonder if I can change the tone. But you're thinking of very broad ideas here, as well as when you have a tape emulation plugin across every single track, they all start to have something in common, which helps glue everything together, which is a really big part of mixing, this gluing together, this kind of cohesiveness, this making everything sound like it's part of the same story or the same picture. That is a really big thing that we're always trying to achieve in mixing. So the tape emulation plugin, I'm going to give you a little demo on the kick drum because I think it's a really good one for showing you just how much you can change the feel of something with one control. I'm using Luna by Universal Audio, which I think is free at the moment for both Windows and Mac users. So you can dive in and try this workflow for yourself today as well. The tape emulation comes before any of the plugins in Luna's mixer, but it's lovely because it's kind of built in. It's got its own little channel and you can see they just sit on every single track and they're always so present. You can see them so clearly. Anyway, let's have a listen to this kick drum, and I'm going to turn the saturation control up from default and you'll hear what it does to the kick drum. Here we go. So that's actually pretty cool. What I think it does is you can hear this, you can hear that it's compressing. So the signal actually gets slightly quieter where it's just condensing everything, but it makes it a lot more consistent because of that. It also takes off some of the low end and kind of adds a bit more to the mid-range. I think this is great as a first step, and often what I'll do on a kick drum is I'll turn the saturation control up pretty high, often full if I'm not getting too much distortion from it, and then I will go and reshape that sound with EQ. So I'll bring in some of that low end again, bring in some of the high end, get rid of some of the mid-ranginess from the kick if I think it needs it. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that big powerful mid-rangey kick can actually work really well for certain genres, so don't always throw it out straight away. But reshaping it with a kick means now, with EQ, sorry, now means you get a really consistent kind of level to work with. And sometimes you don't even need compression after that, or you're just looking at parallel compression to add some of the click and the knock and the power to your drums. Saturation is amazing. It's also wonderful on vocals to add a little bit of instant aggression and compression to vocals. Sometimes it can just be like a one knob mix tool, which is why I use it as the first one on everything. The next plugin, plugin number 2, is my channel strip. Now, I suppose one could argue that this is sort of cheating a little bit because a channel strip has a number of functions built in. But the reason I think it qualifies as one plugin is because of the way it works, the way it smoothly runs from one thing to the next, and it's one interface with all the controls built in. I'm using the SSL 4KB here, which I love. It's actually quite limited in the compression side of things. You have fixed ratios, fixed release times, fixed attack time at about 30 milliseconds, and then a threshold control. There's no fast attack on this one, but oh my gosh, this works on so many sources, especially in conjunction with using the release control to change that timing of the release. And I always find I can get a really cool sound out of this. I may, in some cases, need to go and grab an extra plugin from somewhere else in certain use cases, but the amount of mixes I've finished with just this compressor alone is crazy at this point. It's a really good one. I love it. You've got a full range EQ. You've got your filters, high and low pass filters for cutting out your top and bottom end. There is your gate and expander, so I can sort out my kick and snare bleed if I need to, and it also has an extra little saturation stage, which is lovely. This one also has a width control in it as well, so you can change the stereo width of something, narrowing or widening, and also it can be frequency dependent as well. So there's quite a lot of wonderful benefits in this channel strip. And this one, of course, links to my control surface too, so I don't even need to be looking at the screen. I can just be reaching out and changing controls. So the benefits of a channel strip are really clear. This one has a little bit of a sound, but it's nothing major. You won't really hear this one when it's in its default state. So I absolutely love a channel strip for doing all of your functions that aren't based on time. So things like delay, reverbs, or choruses or flanges or anything like that. Those are separate things. But all of your core tools for completing a professional mix are in one channel strip. Plugin number 3 is over here, and that's my summing. So I really love summing. Summing is really just emulating what happens on a real console when you have a bunch of tracks and they all filter to a bus. Say you take all of your drums and you run them into your drum bus. There is circuitry there that will alter the sound. There is some extra saturation that can come in, and the interaction with even, say, EQ, perhaps on the channel, again, that will glue things together. It will make things cohesive and make things interact a little bit more. Interaction is such an important word to use with mixing, because that's what makes things seem like they're bouncing off of each other and creating that energy and that excitement in a mix. So that's my third plugin. It's really, really simple, really quick. I would just recommend you put that on all of your buses and just get a little bit of extra vibe from that one. So that one always makes it into every single mix I do. Plugin number 4 is my favorite, without a doubt. We're going to listen to this one because I think this one makes a really big difference. I'm going to play some of the track and I'm going to switch it on and off. Now, just to explain how I set this up, I will load my tracks in, and then I will send all of my tracks unity to the room reverb. So what I mean by that is I will just literally set the sends to send exactly the same level of signal to the room reverb. And the room reverb, I think this plugin default wise is mildly quieter, but it's pretty much 50-50. What this does is it gives everything an instant sense that the band or the group, or even if it's electronic music, the artist is all in one gluey kind of interacting space. And then I will set about mixing, literally running that room reverb really loudly. Because without it, I find, well, as you will hear in a second, it tends to sound a little bit brittle and a little bit lifeless. Unless, of course, you already have room sounds as part of your tracking, which a lot of us don't have. A lot of us are working in bedrooms or small rooms or even studios, but they don't have big rooms. You don't have a big spacious kind of a sound like you might get at Abbey Road or Air Studios or something. Anyway, let's have a listen. I'll switch this on and off and you can hear what this does. It just goes from something which has vibe, has character, feels like the band are playing somewhere. You feel like you're in the music. It does feel more three-dimensional, to suddenly just being something that sounds like a tracking session, just like everything's very dry and very flat. And I think the vocals are one where you really do feel that the vocalist just suddenly sits right here in a really unpleasant way, that, rather than being amongst the instruments interacting. So that's a really big one for me. I always use the room reverb, and on a lot of mixes I haven't, if I'm after a very natural representation of the band, if they are a folk band, an acoustic kind of act, absolutely just using the room reverb can get you all the way to the end. If you don't need any of those really big reverb sounds, if you just need space, room reverb every single time. This particular one that I'm using is Ocean Way by Universal Audio. You can tell I'm quite a big fan of Universal Audio. I use a lot of their stuff. This is just wonderful. And also what I like about this one is you can monitor this while you're tracking. And I find that makes things a lot easier as well. If the artist can hear the sense of a bigger space that they're in, whether they're recording drums, guitars, or vocals, it just adds this kind of sense of polish. So that's plugin number 4. Every mix, every single one. Plugin number 5, classic. It's a mix bus compressor and the SSL mix bus compressor. This one is timeless, really. Everyone's heard of this, and if you haven't, you have now, and you would have heard about it very shortly if you hadn't bumped into me here. So this is great. It just adds, a little bit of push and pull to the track. What I do with it specifically from mix to mix does vary, so I will change the controls depending on what I want it to do. Sometimes I will hit a track harder, sometimes it will be hardly touching the track at all. Let's have a quick listen to the track though with this on and off, and we can just see where it's currently set. This is default, by the way. This is just what I've loaded up with the faders turned up on the track. So there's been no adjustment yet. Let's have a listen to it. And it does add a sense of glue. You can hear that the snare drum tucks back a little bit, the vocals settle in, it all just sounds like a little bit more like it's moving in a musical kind of a way. And that's exactly what mix bus compression is so good for. Amongst many other things, you can hit it really hard and do a parallel mix of it where you've got, literally parallel compression on the mix bus. That's a really popular move. And there's, you can hit them really hard so you really hear the mix bus compression pushing and pulling against the music. That's also another popular thing to do. And that's my 5 plugins that I think you should try using on every single mix you do. Start with these, see how far you can go with these. There will always be a case where you need to nip out and get something else, maybe an 1176, or you simply need a bigger reverb, so you need to get some long sounding reverbs that actually have a big tail for, maybe, sort of very glassy, mysterious kind of vocals. But these 5 plugins, so many times I've made a completed mix, sent it to a customer, and they've been really, really happy with the results, as have I. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments what you think, whether you have a particular set of plugins that you always use. I'd love to hear about it. And if you try this, let me know how you get on with it. I'd love to hear from you about how your mixes go when you just start off your mix with predefined plugins, without having to mess around with the choosing or the setup, and you just dive straight in to mixing with this setup. Do try that room thing. Get a room plugin, pop it on, send everything to it, and then mix through it like that. I mean, I say through it. It's, of course, on a bus. It's running parallel, but you get the idea. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch up with you on a video very soon.